Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts. I'm your host, Marty Elliott, and today we have Terry Piche, our Director of Training for Research and Development for the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. We have Art Johnston, who was on our first, if I'm not mistaken, Art, I believe our first podcast we ever did. He is
was one of them.
Yeah. Were you on? Oh, wow. You are a returning guest. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Art is actually from the City of London. He's the facility equipment operator out of the Bostwick Community Center. And welcome, Art. And new to the podcast is Bernie Hurley, originally from London, Ontario, actually, but he is the sports facility officer for the town of Oromocto down in New Brunswick. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So the topic we're going to cover off today for the audience, folks, is we're going to talk about training, talk about what our industry looks like, where it's going, what has been happening, and hopefully the guests on the podcast today will enlighten us a little bit more about what they're doing when it comes to training and building upon it. Terry, let's get it started. So talk to us about how and why did ORFA get into the educational training certification business?
Well, it's a very long story that I'm going to try and melt down to tidbits that won't bore everybody to tears, but it's good to look backward before we look forward and look at the evolution of what training has become over the last little while. So the Ontario Arenas Association was in the training business at the University of Guelph long before the ORFA came along. So they're our founding fathers, and it was basically created way back in the day to assist arena managers, and that's what it really was focused on in regards to understanding the operations of those types of facilities. And we were at the University of Guelph primarily back in the day, and if we went back almost before I started 40 years ago, you needed a provincial certificate if you owned a refrigeration plant. Now that's gone through a bunch of evolutions, but primarily that's how the OAA got into the training business, is that people that were in charge of ice arenas required a provincial certificate, and so they thought they would provide training. And way back in the day, the province would allow us to write the examination on the last day. Then time marched along. The evolution of the Ontario Arenas Association became the Ontario Recreation Facility Association. And in our infancy, we went through a couple of significant events back in the early 90s. One of them was the Hickman accident in London, and it was really ground zero to us. And it was combined with the accident down in LaSalle, which was not a worker, but it was a skater. And we learned in the 90s that we were not the fun department, that we actually had some real responsibilities in offering recreational opportunities. So if we go back and without going deep into what caused the Hickman accident, but more of the outcomes of the coroner's inquest, the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association was identified in the coroner's inquest as being the flag bearer of that information from the outcomes that were discovered of what the contributing factors were. And if you go back and take a look at the coroner's inquest, they recommended that we provide the information that was the contributing factors to that accident to the next generation of practitioners. So we had the LaSalle accident, and we partnered at that time Frank Cowan Company, and we started to do a variety of workshops across the province on skating on thin ice so that they can understand best practices for making ice. It was followed by the Hickman accident, and the court suggesting to us that we needed to get more into the training business. Now, the perfect storm to that is our members, and for those that have taken any training for the ORFA, one of the long-standing traditions at the end of any of our educational courses is the evaluation. So not actually in tune, our members weren't in tune with what was happening behind the scenes. They started to put on the evaluations that they wanted to be recognized as a profession. They challenged the association to come up with some sort of pathway. And to be quite honest with you, Marty, what they were trying to do was close the door from public works. Unions were very strong. And what would happen at public works is that the snowplow driver would get laid off when the snow melted. And they would go through the pecking order and go, you really don't need any skills to work at the arena. I'll bump the guy over there. And they would end up in our facilities completely fish out of water. So our members were saying, look, we need to be recognized as a profession. So the board of directors at the time made the investments for us to come up with the professional accreditation pathways. And that's how we got into the educational business. And we refer to as training. And that's one of the things, Marty, that's really occurred over the last little while is that, yeah, the ORFA provides training per se, but when we started off, the Occupational Health and Safety Act had been in existence, but it started to amplify in regards to our roles and responsibilities. And the whole workplace specific training component was part of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Now, we went through a whole time period where people believed that when they sent their staff to ORFA, they would return miraculously completely trained. Some of them really thought they could start pulling apart the refrigeration system because they took basic arena refrigeration and were successful. And we go back and we take a look at some of the trials and tribulations, and we chuckle at them now. Like, we would have people call up and say, well, you know, Jimmy took the ORFA basic refrigeration course and only got 67. How do I know it's the 67% that he needs to know? And then we would have those types of conversations, say, well, look at, you know, we're kind of like a post-secondary institution. You can go to college for 2 years or university and get a diploma and get recognized, but you really don't have that practical skills that come along with the education. So what we've done as an organization over the last 30 odd years is create a pathway for those that want a very strong understanding of the industry that they're in. It's not bulletproof, it's not perfect. It doesn't apply to every environment because we're such a diverse industry. But we believe that we've created an educational program that, in, again, full disclosure, is a collection of either successes or mistakes, things that shouldn't be repeated and things that have been very successful. So when we talk about the ORFA and what we do as an organization, it's important for the average person to understand that, yes, if you go onto our website, you know, look up the staff of the ORFA, you're going to get a catalog of individuals that are employed by the association. But the ORFA, in fact, is a membership-driven organization. We get our information from those that are in the front line. We scavenge that information from them. We scavenge information from manufacturers like yourself.
Right.
So part of the evolution was the introduction of the certified ice technician designation. So we had basic refrigeration, and then we had the ice maintenance equipment operation program, and both primary manufacturers in the province invested heavily back in the day for us to come up with a program that would be both beneficial to the manufacturer and the industry as a whole. The better that we train individuals that are in care and control of the equipment that you provide to them, the less heartache that you get on your side, right? I mean, if they know how to maintain it, the phone hopefully won't ring as much for the little stuff because they'll be able to figure out. And that's really where we wanted to go. And so the manufacturers invested. And when we first started off with the IMEO, we would have a practical component attached to it, meaning that we actually let the people drive and we would test them on their driving ability. And it worked fairly well in the beginning because the majority of the individuals we got had some sort of experience with the machine. They were more there to hone their skills. But as they flushed out, we started to get the next generation who would never sit in the seat. I can still remember having conversations with Frank Kellner over a cold beer going, we got to really rethink this. Like, I mean, I'm getting on the back of a machine with somebody who's never been in care and control of this piece of equipment, and they're being tested. So their anxiety is already high because they've never driven it. And now they're going through a testing component. So it was a multiplier. So time marched along, and as an organization, we reevaluated what we were doing. And so we came up with what we refer to as a passport for many of our training programs. It says, look, you got a really strong theoretical understanding of what it is that you're responsible for. But there's a variety of things that have to go on in your workplace specific to the piece of equipment, the environment you're in. and the different variables that need to have checked off that says that you've actually had somebody internal that has provided you with that workplace specific training. So over time, we've evolved as an organization. We still provide what we refer to as professional accreditation. You take a look at the job postings that come out as part of our electronic newsletter on a weekly basis. 75% of all the jobs that are looking for some form of accreditation. Often it is an ORFA accreditation. Full disclosure, Marty, when we started off 30 years ago, really thought the whole industry would flock towards receiving the certified ICE technician designation. And what we're finding is that, in fact, it's that supervisor, lead hand position who are getting that level of competency to support that position. Yeah, there's some frontline staff, depending on their employer, investing in it and such that are there. But I would suggest to you is that by no way is the majority of the industry flocking to receive training from ORFA as part of their due process in regards. It's highly sought after, it's highly recognized, but it's not mandatory that an individual hold that. Now, with all that said, our responsibility as an association, and let's go back to the fact that it's membership driven. It's not the individuals that work in the office on the Don Valley. It's the reality is what is the industry saying that you need for skill sets? And so what happens is when the ORFA comes along and says, if you've got this responsibility, we recommend that you have this or higher, and it's not in place and something happens, then the Ministry of Labor, TSSA, other governing agencies, if they are going to do an investigation, are going to use that as ground zero in regards to the competency of the individual who is being investigated or is being part of the investigation. So we set the baseline. Doesn't mean that you have to come to ORFA. We spell everything out. We give all the direction in the world in regards to what an individual requires. And if it's self-taught and there's pathways that are designed internally, fabulous. At the end of the day, we're doing what it is that we need to do as an organization, is to provide that leadership. That doesn't mean that everybody has to buy into it.
Sure. I just want to jump back for a second, Terry. You talked about not everyone's coming to the trough to eat, if you will. What do you attribute that to? Why is it that the municipalities are not putting this at the forefront when it comes to training? That it almost sounds, I know it is optional, but why wouldn't municipalities want to protect themselves, their people, their customers, their communities? Why wouldn't they want to have that in place for everyone?
It's an interesting question from a guy that gets scrutinized on every RFP that they try and squeeze a nickel off the bottom line of a purchase of $170,000 piece of equipment, right? They believe that if they can find a less expensive path to get the result they're looking for, they're going to go down that road.
And if we go back to the 90s, sometimes that does not play in a positive way for the municipality, the cost.
Absolutely not. So we have a good inventory of our members that understand the value of what we do as an organization. And trust me, our responsibility is not to get everybody to sign up to be an ORFA member, right? That's not the intention. Our responsibility, and having conversation with government officials over the last little while, specifically with TSSA. Like, they asked us directly in a recent meeting, why do you do what you do, ORFA? Like, we don't understand why the investment of what you're doing. And this was a senior manager with TSSA, and it was an honest question. And my response back to him stunned him. I said, you probably think that we do it for our membership. You don't, he says. No, we don't. And I know that sounds a little bizarre because we're a membership-driven organization. We do it because we're responsible for the integrity of the brand that we hold. And Paula and I were just talking about that when we came on board. She's in the background, how important a brand is. So what happens is we have been summoned to the courts on several occasions and asked, where were you, ORFA? What were you doing to avoid this? Were you providing the direction? Because when there's not legislation, the courts or the governing agencies look for agencies like ORFA, and there's others, to say, okay, you guys are the watchdogs for the industry. Were you aware of it? Yep. What were you doing? Well, we put this resource out. We have this training program. We have this accreditation. We don't want to talk to you anymore. Now they're going to go back to the individuals who made the financial decision not to go down that pathway and say, look, had you gone there, we wouldn't be here today. Why didn't you go there? So there can be a day of reckoning down the road for those that don't buy in. Ultimately, the staff members that you see on the association were the gatekeepers for past generations in the industry and future generations. We can't force anybody to do. We get the comments all the time. You know, it's a little bit too expensive what you do, RFA. And my response back is that really you need to reevaluate maybe what you're talking about here. The best communication that I've received in the last little while was from a young man who received his certified ice technician designation. And his comment to me was, Mr. Piche, I'm excited that I got my CIT today. It cost me, I'm spitballing, $6,398 for me to get it. He had narrowed down every penny. And he said, this much for motel rooms and travel and in class and my investment. But he said, you know, Mr. Piche, he said, I calculated, I got a job today with such and such community starting $53,000 a year. I've prorated it at 1.5% increase for 30 years. I've looked at my pension. He said, my $7,000 investment has got a return on investment of a little bit over $350,000. Best investment I've ever made. So here's somebody who looks at it from a different point of view. Our members are, respectfully, many of them are kept, meaning that they get hired by their employer and the employer takes care of them from cradle to grave. From the time they arrive, they provide them with a good wage and a benefit package and a pension and send them for training. And they just get addicted that it's the employer's responsibility to invest in them moving forward.
Right. And that brings on the next question. When it comes to practicality, why did the ORFA pull themselves back strictly to focus on the technical side and not more the practical side, where the involvement of the membership, like myself back in 2012, had the practical part of the IMEO course? What's the reasoning for that, Terry?
Well, Marty, again, full disclosure, and I started off the conversation by saying our success has been based on mistakes at times. And we would stand in front of the class, for example, and say, before you have care and control of a refrigeration plant, you need to go through a variety of things. So we back in the day, and one of our other guests that's going to come on shortly earlier, I'm sure Art was there, we would take a whole class into the basic arena, the refrigeration plant room as part of the training course, and we would describe the cycle of refrigeration and the equipment that was in there. And it was kind of a static display in regards to the theoretical that they received in the classroom. Very much added value.
Right.
But if you stood in front of the class and said a whole bunch of things that had to occur in the workplace, then we would drag 25 students down to a refrigeration plant, no safety footwear, no eyeglasses, no hearing protection, would bring them inside the room, and under the operating engineer regulation, it states that anybody that's not in front of the book needs to be identified in the logbook if they're a guest. So we were supposed to put all 25 people into the book and say, why are you here? What are they doing? And we weren't doing any of that. So we were exposing the host because they're the ones that are ultimately responsible. We were exposing the students because they weren't properly prepared for the environment is, and we were being somewhat hypocritical. Meaning that we stood in front of the class and say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but come on with us. We're going down this way.
Right.
So we reevaluated all our training courses. So we call them demonstrations now, not practicals, because we get you to demonstrate a blade change. We get you to demonstrate a circle check. And yes, there is limited involvement because of the risks that are associated, the accountabilities and the responsibilities. That's just part of the evolution of our society as a whole.
Sure.
That we made the passport that says we've given you a strong theoretical, go back to work and do the following now.
Right.
So that brings us to the evolution of what we're going to talk about a little bit later on here in the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which leads into what is the role? That's an example of a role that ORFA takes over as far as best practices in the industry. What other parts, as far as ORFA's role as, let's call it the gatekeeper, would be involved?
Well, our responsibility is that we need to collect all the information, data, and experiences so that it's not lost for the next generation. So anytime there's an issue, a problem, incident, accident, we garnish that information and we put it into our training programs so the next generation is aware, and the potential for it to be repeated is dramatically reduced. Right. So at the end of the day, employers have several pathways that they can explore. One of them is us. We keep current, we keep up to date. We do both history and current items that are happening inside the industry. Or they can develop their own internal pathway. Now, what you need to appreciate is that we set the bar. As long as the individuals are creating their own internal pathway, meet or exceed what we do as an association, and that's no different across every other province and territory. Those organizations would be setting the bar, and they're in great shape. So good on them for taking on that responsibility, but it's a hell of a responsibility. My job as the Director of Training, Research, and Development is to monitor this stuff 24/7.
Sure.
Make sure that nothing slips through.
Right. Yeah. So taking a look at the industry right now and attrition, what municipalities are doing from a succession planning, because the guests on the show today, obviously, and I know they know this, the industry is dwindling due to the fact of retirement. And one of the things is a big challenge for municipalities, and we'll have our guests talk to this as well, is getting people. Once they get them, they're as green as green. Talk to us in the audience, Terry, about Zero and what that allows the municipality and management of the Parks and Rec to be actually introduce, if you will, those candidates that they're bringing on board to operating an ice resurfacer.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll back up before we go forward just slightly here, Marty. As much as we're losing individuals through retirements in our industry, the bigger problem that we got is a life expectancy of less than 10 years with staff member in our industry. Because what happens is they come on board and they'll stay with us for about a maximum of 10 years. Then they don't care how much we're paying them. They're not working nights and weekends. If they haven't got a management position, they're moving on. They're not staying their whole career with us. They've got a whole bunch of skill sets that are transferable. And so we're seeing a higher turnover at that, which is, I tongue-in-cheek say, the life expectancy of somebody in our industry, because we're dealing with the general public. We're working weekends. We're dealing with a lot of responsibility, and as they mature, they move on. So your question in regards to our introduction to the Safe Ice Resurfacer Operator course, we're, as I said, a membership-driven organization, and we listen to our members. Our members came to us and said, you know what, Terry, really love the way the ORFA has put together the IMEO course, but I can't send, or I can't justify, or I can't afford the expense for a seasonal worker for that much training. That's great for my full-time staff, but we need something that's more of a quick fix so that our lead hands understand that they understand the risks and the hazards and all that kind of good stuff. Can ORFA make something that will assist us with our seasonal workers? And we're doing that in all the other silos that we represent, aquatics and grounds and such. So we introduced the Safe Ice Resurfacer Operator course, and it's available online. Somebody who's coming into the industry can get a really quick education in regards to what they're about, they need to ask when they get to the rink. And it's one of those things an employer can now say to a part-time person, we want you to arrive with your first aid. We want you to come with your WHMIS, and we really want you to have the ORFA Safe Ice Resurfacer Operators course, so that when we train you, we know that you have a working knowledge of the equipment.
Right.
So that was the thought process in regards to us introducing that reduced. It doesn't replace the IMEO. It doesn't fast track you for the IMEO or the certified ice technician designation. It's a quick fix in regards to part-time staff.
Right. Well, let's bring our other guests in now, Bernie and Art, and talk about how that relates back to what you folks are doing within your municipalities as far as training, your standard operating procedures, and what other best practices you folks put in the program. Maybe Bernie, I'll start with you, and maybe you can talk about what you do with your facility and your staff, and what training programs outside of what the industry provides, but what training you add to what is already there.
Hi, this is Bernie. The ORFA's credibility is second to none. None of us can compete, nor do we want to, in trying to offer the same training and expertise as they do. Mm-hmm. In Atlantic Canada, we used to have the MAOI over in PEI.
Right.
So we would send guys there. Again, it's comparable to the ORFA, but not really at the same level. A couple of years ago, the province of New Brunswick and PEI had approached me to create a course curriculum for a level 1 and a level 2 ice technician course. Mm-hmm. So I jumped all over it thinking, oh, sure, I'll do that. Little did I know it would take me 18 months of putting this thing together. You know what you know, but right. When it comes time to put it on paper and explain it so people can easily understand it, that's a whole another ball game. So
don't we know, Terry? Don't we know?
Yeah.
Rome was not built in a day.
No. So sure. Anyway, after 18 months of cursing and swearing and late nights at the supper table, I finally completed it, and we've been teaching it here in New Brunswick and in PEI over the past year and a half now.
Nice.
And just my years of experience with my staff, I try to pass on as much knowledge as possible, when I see them doing things that they shouldn't or things that they could do better. But that's the approach we take. Mm-hmm. ORFA has some stuff available online that my guys take. Recreation Facilities Association in Nova Scotia falls under the umbrella of ORFA, so right. That is a venue or a way my guys can go. It's just down the road, so mm-hmm. But to send guys to Ontario is just not feasible.
Right. Yeah. Or you can do what you and Art Johnston, our other guest, have done, and put together a social media group, which is the Professional Ice Technicians on Facebook. And perhaps maybe Art, I'll bring you into this. What led you and Bernie, outside of the fact that you're both originally from London, Ontario, and I don't know if you knew each other prior to, outside of the industry, but what brought you two together and to create this group within the social media platform?
Thanks, Marty. Honestly, we were just chatting over the year, and I think we both kind of agreed that we wanted a group where people could come to and ask questions and not be, belittled or talked down to, you right. know. And I think that that's really shown in the group that we've created now. So,
well, I can attest to that, being a member, that the level of respect of all members with each other is top notch, which is great to see. I'm sure, Bernie, you can attest to that as well. The fact that everyone's there to help everybody. Would that be one of the basis of you guys creating this Facebook group?
Yeah, I think so. For sure it has.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do you guys manage? Because there's a lot going on in that medium with that group. A lot of questions are coming out, and it almost seems like a lot of responses will come back to that question that's being asked, whoever is initializing it. But how do you guys, from administrators, because do you guys actually critique those responses to make sure are they correct? Because not everyone does the same thing the correct way, if you will. They kind of do it the way they've been taught, which might not be the correct way. So I guess, how do you guys oversee this to make sure that that proper information, that right information, is getting back to the individual that's asking the question?
For me, I just kind of let the answers roll. And then what'll happen is so the members will decide what they want to do. If they see that, X number of people are doing it this way and Y number of people are doing it another way, they'll make up their minds and determine what's best for them. So that's what I think anyways.
And and like Art had mentioned, we try not to belittle anyone, but if someone gets on there and asks a question, say about the plant, and someone's response is, yeah, just go in there and turn off this valve and take this apart, one of us will definitely step in and say, listen, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely don't do that.
Right.
But other than that, like Art said, we just let them roll. That is the one downside is, you have 4,000 members and 1,000 of them have daily opinions on how something should be done. And maybe 100 of them opinions are correct and 900 aren't really accurate. But we try not to get in there and, belittle anyone or say, listen, you don't know what you're talking about. It's
right. But I guess, and I'll speak for myself, being an OEM rep for Zamboni and Terry, not to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure for even Terry, I read some of these responses of questions that have been asked or challenges that someone's going through within their particular facility, and some of the answers I just shake my head and, oh my Lord.
Yes.
My Lord. Oh my Lord. I'm just cringing. I'm just, please, you didn't say that sort of thing. So that's so and not belittling, but maybe Terry, I'll throw it out to you. Maybe some feedback on how we manage, or for these two gentlemen, maybe some ideas to share with them.
Well, again, I'll back up a little bit first, Marty. Bernie, I feel your pain, buddy, and I congratulate you for the time that you've done to get those cornerstones in place. I've watched the East Coast go up and down the hills over the years and trying to get some traction, and you've got them moving in the right direction. It will evolve naturally. There will always be room for improvement. So, you know what? Kudos to you for taking that first step to provide that direction in your region. So and I again, on behalf of the ORFA, we always appreciate the accolades that we get from other organizations, and it's important, Marty, that people understand we don't go anywhere that we're not invited. We have no aspirations of taking over the world. We really want to be able to foster relationships like Bernie and the East Coast, and anything that we can do to help build the industry without tap dancing in their backyard, we're more than pleased to be able to assist. So, as I watch the evolution of information, and that's what we've always been as an organization, as information brokers. We collect information and we try and filter it. And one of the things that I mentioned in the last little while, people will call up and they'll say, well, what does ORFA think about a certain product or piece of equipment? Let's use battery technology, for example, right? Like, what does ORFA think about battery technology? And my canned response now is the ORFA doesn't think, it listens. Meaning that we don't have the expertise to evaluate anything that's coming into the marketplace, but we're sure going to listen to our members who are investing in these new products. And when our members are saying, this is the way of the future, this is where we're going, really like it, a couple of small issues, bugs that need to be worked out, which are traditional, they get our attention. And our job is to talk to Art, talk to Bernie. They're in the trenches every day. They've gone down this road. They're really the expertise. Now, I chuckle to myself in regards to the tagger they got by the tail. When you have 3,000 wannabe industry experts. It's got to be a perfect storm of information. It's got to be coming in from all in. And tongue in cheek, and I hopefully I don't offend anybody, I always say that the arena business was the first AI, artificial intelligence, meaning that so many people in this industry that believe because they worked in it for 20 years that they were industry experts, and they whatever they were doing became the only way to be able to do it.
Right,
And
right.
Greg Wright summarized it up many years ago, past President Greg, by saying, have you got 20 years experience, or do you have 1 year experience 20 times? Meaning you haven't done anything different since you started inside the industry.
If I had a nickel for every time I see that. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Absolutely. So I mean, as an organization, we have our discussion board,
Right.
but it's not in real time. And this is the evolution of our industry. You know, kudos for these guys for taking on that challenge to want to be the gatekeeper for that many people with opinions on a certain thing. Glad that we've got some individuals that are grounded and have a working knowledge that can kind of say, nah, that's probably not 100% right. You might want to take a look at this. But it's gotta be a huge undertaking in trying to corral this information and keep it in a civil. And there's going to be some passionate people that are obviously going to express themselves. And I've watched a couple of these groups self-implode over the years, because it gets to a point that the passion takes over, and then the arguments start, and then people just start to disconnect from it. And that's going to be the trick, is how do you keep it moving into the future so that it does have some value. But being able to get answers in what I refer to real time. Somebody may contact the ORFA, and we may be a day or two before we get back to them. When you go on Facebook and you throw something out, man, it's instantaneous in regards to what the response is.
Sure. Which I was going to ask the gentlemen, Bernie and Art, was that one of the goals when you set up this social group, to be able to get those responses to questions that were being asked a lot quicker than waiting for a sales rep from an OEM or someone from the industry association to get back to them a couple days later? Is that one of the goals, guys?
Yeah, it's worked, great on several occasions. Someone gets on there and has a fault code on their Boni, and Everett Tucker just happens to be on there, and he'll tell them, oh, that fault code means this, you got to do this, and bang, the person's on their way. Like Terry had mentioned, it's also, it's a storm waiting to happen if you let it. Thankfully, we have a lot of good members, the Kyle Lemke's, the Francois Martindales, Ryan Hevern. Them guys are on there, and they're not scared to jump in. These guys are experts in this, industry, and they're not scared to speak up or share their knowledge. So it's been great that way. But again, like Terry said, everybody has an opinion. It's comical at times. It really is. And it could be dangerous, but it hasn't come to that, and hopefully it never does. If you want to ask a question, We're not going to review it first and see if it's worthy of making it on the group.
Right.
And so far it's worked well. There's no harm in asking. And there's no harm in sharing your opinion, as long as it's not going to harm someone else, right?
Yeah. Art, let me ask a question. What type of feedback are you getting from the members? Are they reaching out to you and Bernie and actually coming back to you and giving you feedback, but neutral, positive, negative?
We've had a couple posts where members have commented that they're grateful for the help and everything like that, just because they're getting the answers that they need, right? So I haven't seen any negative feedback. For the most part, the members are really good. They're they appreciate what we're doing, and I'm looking forward to see where this thing can actually go. So.
And you said 4,000 members are presently on this group?
We're approaching 4,000. It's been a year and a half roughly, and we're at about 3,600. Other groups, similar, are at 4,000 and 5,000 members after 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So it's just became a beast of its own and, taken off.
In a positive way. I will tell you, and Terry, maybe you want to speak to this as well. For me, myself, being a member of it and watching these questions, it is humbling though, because one of the things I do for the for Zamboni Company is I'm the trainer, and we've developed Zamboni Boot Camp, which I go out in the marketplace and introduce and support our customers with their machines and their operators, and providing other training. But there's a lot of times questions will come up and I'll go, I know this person knows this answer, but they choose not to, for whatever reason, they just don't want to go any farther to look for it. They just come to the group, which is a positive, because they feel that they can actually come to this group and not be judged and not be identified, to ask certain questions without have any sort of humility involved in it. So kudos to you, gentlemen, to do what you've done over the last year and a half. And the size of the membership, that's fantastic, part of your group. So that's awesome. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
Well, Marty, from my seat, I have purposely stayed away from any of these groups. And it's not that I don't believe in them, because I honestly believe they have a lot of value. We're a membership-driven organization. And if we were to get involved with these groups and start spewing out what we know at no cost, we're not going to be around for very long. And the other thing is that it can be consuming. I can be on there for 3 or 4 hours a day just fixing stuff that if they come to class, they would have got the information. But if they want to be misdirected, well, I can't always fix that. So
no.
I believe that the attraction is that there's no registration fee. It's free to be able to get involved and get the information. It should come with a filter, though, meaning that a lot of the information that are on these, and that's not to say I don't look at them to see what's going on, but I'm not going to engage. I don't want to come off as an authority, and I really don't want to be putting a damper on the conversation. I don't want people to be afraid that Big Brother's watching, and if I say something wrong, they're going to shut me down. Let their peers do that, and I think that's a more healthy type relationship.
Agreed.
What they're doing is the future. I mean, this isn't going away. This is only going to grow. And as Art said, I wonder where this is going. Well, 3 years ago, we wouldn't even have talked like this. Now we're wondering where it's going after a year and a half of existence. And I think there's lots of opportunity for it to be explored. Harnessing it, having it move in the right direction is going to require some leadership. In your growth, you're going to have to get into a code of conduct. You're going to have to someday have people click on, I will act respectfully, and if I don't, we're booting you off if it's not ready in place, because you will get those zealots. You will get those individuals that just want to wreak havoc. And that's the biggest thing that we had to put in place with some of the tools that we make available, is to make sure that everybody plays nice inside the sandbox. And that'll come with time and evolution.
So what you're saying is Bernie and Art have a lot of work ahead of them, no?
Well, no, I think they have an opportunity. They're on a sleigh ride, and they'll have to decide how it's going to be able to move forward, because it may get to a point where it requires structure, and structure requires money, right? Because if you want to hire someone that's just monitoring and being the police and making sure that everybody's playing nice, that might be the future, or it just continues to allow to free fly, I guess, for the next while, and see in fact where it is going to go.
Yeah, and you talk about different segments of how to approach and deliver training aspects, whether it be on a social media platform, whether it be through your association ORFA, or whether it be through your supplier of your isosurfacer like Zamboni with our Zamboni Boot Camp, our innovative products, Zamboni Connect training platforms, then all our resource centers, all our videos, everything that has happened over the last 3 years, pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. It's certainly opened our eyes, if you will, of what mediums we can use to be able to provide the training to our industry and to our members, of whether it be a podcast or a social media platform, or our industry overseeing us, ORFA. It's definitely changed us in what we do and how we go about doing the training that we do. Gentlemen, I want to, sorry, go ahead,
Marty,
Terry.
before you move on,
Yeah.
Art's been around and been involved in the ORFA, and what it reminds me of, Art, is the conversation that we would always hear at the University of Guelph. I learned just as much after class as I did in class. And what you've done is you've created that social environment where individuals can speak their mind, speak their experience, either provide that expertise or get corrected on some of their thought processes. That's really what you've done, is that you're back in grifts, or you're back at the brass tacks, where everybody's standing around and providing their experiences and their comments and things that have gone on. And that's kind of where you guys are at, in my opinion. It's that open social. We've always been, as an industry, generous with our information, and it's being able to provide it in a polite manner, so that we can all learn from it. So congratulations on the success, and I really hope that you move it forward. I mean, it is impressive what you guys have done in a very short period of time. It's needed, and it doesn't impact what we're doing as an organization. In my opinion, it complements it. So let's continue to watch how it evolves, and if there is any role that the association can play sometime in the future, let's explore that. But we really don't want to get into the organic evolution of it. I think you've got to allow it to continue to do what it's doing for the next while, and see if in fact it can't find its own level. And I believe the success for what you guys are trying to do is forthcoming.
Certainly speaks loud. Certainly speaks loud, Terry, to what Art and Bernie have done and are doing and will continue to do. Being leaders in the industry, being leaders of trying to provide information back to the members of our industry, and with our leader from ORFA, Terry Piche. Gentlemen, I want to thank you, all three of you, for coming on to join in our podcast, talking about training and what you folks are doing. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add to share with the audience before we let everyone go?
Yeah, just quickly, Marty, one of the things that we had identified when we cobbled out what we're going to talk about is Art. I understand that you've got a fairly comprehensive workplace-specific training program for your operators in your operation. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, and really, that, when we started off, Marty, and you asked me why did we get out of the practical, because it's not our responsibility. It's individuals like Art who are responsible to design a workplace-specific training program as required in our health and safety laws. And anytime that I hear that someone like Art has stepped forward and created a pathway for their operators internally, with or without ORFA assistance, that's a success of what we started 40 years ago. We always said that our members have to take care and control of their own environments. And when someone like Art, who's gone through what we've done, listened, and then gone back and applied it, to me, that's a success story. And that's really why we want to go over the last little while. What we didn't talk about was the relationship with Zamboni and the ORFA when the boot camp concept came to light. And in full disclosure, there was some anxiety internally with the ORFA when we heard that, you know, your business was going down that route. But you know what? You guys came to the table in full disclosure, told us what you wanted to do, why you wanted to do it, and said, look, we want to partner with the ORFA. We're going to recommend that they take the CSIRO course before we go in and do their boot camp. Not mandatory. But you guys see the value in having a strong theoretical before you get there with your toolbox and start pulling things apart, so that you don't have to get down into the weeds and start talking about the basics. So when we get an opportunity to work with someone like that, we're going to jump all over it as an organization. That's value to what we do. You guys are the experts. We've got the history. We've got a whole bunch of different information. And it was the perfect relationship. So, you know, the evolution of what's going on, there's other providers that are getting into this business that are trying to provide what I refer to as the dollar store approach, because they're less expensive and our members are sometimes crunched for money and they take that option. You know what? If that's all they can afford and they want to go that route, that's a decision that they make, and there's nothing the matter with that. But
Mhm.
really, the success story here for us is guys like Art who came, listened, and actually went back and put it into motion.
Right, right. And well said, Terry, what these
I,
gentlemen are doing for sure. Sorry, Art, go ahead.
I really appreciate that, Terry. Without Orpha, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm developing a refrigeration component training for our temp laborers for the arenas right now, and I've put so many hours into it, and it's incredible what the effort that it's taken. But it's things that I've taken away from you guys that I'm putting into this, and it shows, right? So I just want to
Nice,
say thank you for that.
nice, nice. Anything to add, Bernie, on your side?
No, but thank you, Marty, for the weekly Marty Minute on the professional ice technician group. That thing's getting up to 3,000 views a week now. So
Wow, wow.
good on you, and thank you very much for doing that every week.
Well, there's a story behind that. Thank you for recognizing that, Bernie. It all came to fruition through our marketing and brand department, both Paula Cooney and then Ben Fernstein, who makes me sound and look good. It was their idea that they came to me one day with this idea, and I went, "What?" Anyways, it's worked out, and definitely getting some great feedback on it. So thank you very kindly. And I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts podcast. If you have a question for one of our experts or an idea for a future episode, please email your questions or requests to info@zamboni.com. For more information on additional podcasts, please visit zamboni.com/podcasts or search Ask the Zamboni Experts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform that you may be using. This is Marty Elliott, your host, wishing you an ice day.